I am not disposed to do much recovering and re-mentioning of what I was talking about the last time we met, because it is so basic, so direct, and so simple about this whole kind of activity, that is, the complex consuming the simple, that there is not a lot more to say other than a couple of areas. And at the time I mentioned where I was insisting that they were mathematically, chemically, physically absolutes, on the basis that it was much more than what would appear to be some philosophical or even psychological idea reflecting the ordinary affairs of man. It is quite basic. But in the couple of instances I did say that, I want to be sure, if I must, to make some very simple examples to try and get you to see that this was not, in spite of what I said, that what I was talking about was not some intellectual map that was only good in theory. Now, several things. Well, let me get to the several recovering, the examples. But one that I just barely touched on is that in a very crude production, people throughout life are attempting to make themselves more complex. They do so via fashions, fads, all forms of self-improvement, and the ever-popular talking. But in spite of what I was mentioning that many of you reacted to at the time, that if your life ceases, when your life ceases to be a continuing becoming more complex, you are dying. And I pointed out that many people are dying, going to the process of dying at the age that they're considered to be adults. But now, in spite of that, there is within the life of life, remember, that the overall system is growing. Any overall system can be growing and expanding, where within the system, at a lower level, at a more simplistic level, you can find that which seems to be dying. That the larger system can be generally evolving, whereas internal systems, more simplistic systems, can apparently be engaged in a continuing processes of evolutions. The breaking down of foods within your body, the food looks at it as being regression. But now on the basis of that, I want you to try and see that the human activities, and I just picked out enough that will cover almost any contingency of which you can conceive, but all of the human activities, especially the ones that rise above the areas of minimal survival endeavors, of eating and screwing and sleeping. But past that, you're looking at people making crude or involved in crude productions on their own individual level of trying to become more complex. It is easy enough for ordinary people, for social critics, to laugh at the herd instinct of people adapting fads, and everybody 4 years ago talking about their personal space, and then talking about networking, and whatever the phrase is for the week. And it's easier for social critics. It's easier for one part of life's body to point at other parts and saying they're blind followers. That if the so-called upper ends of the middle class, if there was such a beast, if they start wearing purple scarves, you can count on suddenly, at those kind of fern bars, I guess they're still popular, the term is, suddenly everybody will be driving up in their BMWs, if they're still popular, and everybody will be wearing purple scarves. They do not understand. That part of life's body does not understand. That's why there are critics and stuff out there at the bar getting sloshed, picking up women wearing a purple scarf. They're out somewhere writing these little old nitpicky columns that hardly anybody reads except a few nitpicky readers. At least nobody takes seriously. But the fads, the fashions, I have never seen many attempts, which is just as well, in the city of people trying to explain how fashion comes about. It gets attacked enough, not just women's fashion, that's always been the easy mark for men to attack, but men are now almost as subject to it as women were from any even horizontal view. And the city has never really given much attempt, as I said, it would be a waste of time, but that's one of the few areas that they've never given much attempt that I'm aware of trying to explain it. They denounce it, many parts of the city, many parts of life's body denounce it, ridicule it. But what is it? Why do people want to be in fashion? Why do they want to be dressed what they consider to be in fashion, to talk, to say they believe, to be, people change religions to be more in fashion. It used to be that kind of crude joke that in the South, if you ever graduated from high school and became a social climber, you'd leave the Baptist church and try to be a Methodist to prove that you were literate. You could sing a song, a hymn, without foaming at the mouth. At any rate. At any rate. All such things are very crude productions of individuals attempting on their personal level to be more complex. That's it. There is no actual true complexity in the city on that basis. It is more like an enriched simplicity. That is, it does not change the way in which they die. It does not change their position vis-a-vis life's memory of them. It does not change their position within the body of life. If it did, it would not be a fad. If it did, it would not be a fashion. It would be something permanent, and it would be something that was not emblematic of a large group of people's lead. So it is not going to change anything, except I want you to understand that what apparently can be verbally paradoxical within life's body still exists there. So I'm saying on that level you should be able to feel this from your own experience. It does not have to verbally be logical, because it's not. I'm saying two verbally opposed things. That ordinary people die at a very early age in the quite real sense, that they cease to become more complex. That is generally one way of looking at it, one correct way. What is looked at as maturity is when that kind of passionate drive to be complex is normally called to grow up. When it hits its zenith, and then it begins to go downhill. You begin to die. You begin to look for, not knowing it this way, not analyzing it, verbally or otherwise, but you begin to look for more and more simplicity. The older you get, the less shit you'll put up with. Or, if you're an English major, the less shit up with which you shall put. Everybody knows how common it is for somebody to get older and older. They're more inclined to sit around the house, to do less and less, to get focused. Now, we're wonderful days that we don't have to have fires in the house and burn it down to stare at the fire. You turn on the TV and sit there 12 hours a day. It is a simplicity. It is going to a more simple life. It is the person themselves becoming more simplistic. But within that context, simultaneously, coevally, you have people attempting a crude version of being more complex. Watching TV, as a matter of fact, starts out. Reading. Almost any activity, as I said. I don't have to keep looking for examples, and I did not pick out TV as some sort of cheap shot. Almost anything that humans do, you can see as being, it amounts to ultimately an inefficacious attempt to become more complex, because it does not change the person. They do not become more complex, but it is like a compounding of their simplicity, a kind of enriching of the simplicity. But almost everything that you do, the ordinary people do beyond screwing and eating and sleeping, is some form, some crude movement toward more complexity. What can be used by you people, I'll assume that not all of you now, or all of you are not totally caught in the throwers of the death slide toward more simplicity, or you would not be here. You could not even stay here 3 nights a week and keep your eyes open. I wouldn't tolerate you being here unless there was some movement against the slide into terminal simplicity. So given that, one reason I'm bringing this up is you can use it as a kind of template in many areas of life wherein human activity seems to be pointless. And it's worse if you're listening to your old nervous system jangling. It can be open to ridicule. or anger or criticism. Like, how dumb? And it's not dumb. People being fashionable. I was trying to figure out something that I figured most of your nervous systems could in some way agree with. People attempting to be hip, especially rubes from your viewpoint, especially the bucolic lad attempting to dress up, and he's only 2 years behind whatever the fashion is, and so just fast as it changes. But to look upon people as being some sort of dumb herd animals that cannot think for themselves, and they all just keep trying to do the same thing, and then they rush over here, and then they rush over there, it is the best they can do. It is all that life requires of large numbers of people to apparently be making some movement to be more complex. All forms of attempts at self-improvement, although I pointed out in different ways while warning you I'm not attacking it, but people going to encounter groups, people attempting to take crystals and do whatever they do with them nowadays and hold them to their head or talk to the dead and all that stuff. It's an attempt to be more complex. You ought to be able to see that. It's got nothing to do with real activity. It's got nothing to do with this. But all of these attempts, no matter how far-fetched they may sound, even if it's something beyond the mainstream of a current fad, that there is a few group around that's still claiming the earth is flat. It's an attempt to be more complex. At one time, it would not have flown in that direction. If at one time, indeed, as some cheap history books would have it, that most of the world believed the world was flat. If you believe that, you deserve to read history books, I guess. But if one time, as popular theory would have it, if one time the major thinking was that the earth was flat, you understand thinking the earth was flat would not be a way to even crudely attempt to become more complex. The only way is that now that nobody believes that in general, to be a little more complex is for you to say you believe it. So it does not have to be in the mainstream of following a fad, but that is basically what is easy to see is whatever the current thinking, whatever the current dress, whatever the current taste in music, in any tribe, in any particular locale, what the local reporting of is of what is hip, what is in, what is with it, what is worthwhile, what is a move up the step, up the ladder, up the line. Well, they don't look at it the line, up the ladder. All of that is a crude movement toward personal complexity. That can come in useful, is the reason I bring it up. Now, a couple of the things I am going to go back and touch on. You recall that I pointed out, and I noticed a lot of you wrote it down and a lot of you thought you felt something then, that just past everything is itself again. And I took enough time to point out that that was not just a clever use of words or a complex or paradoxical use of words, but in the 3D world there is an easy example. If there you were and you were going to transverse the globe, and you're going around the equator or the pole longitudes, and you took off, you do realize, and this is just geometric, physical fact, that the furthest distance you're going to be away from where you started going in this direction is going to be where? You just one CH before you get back where you were. So you have transversed, you have gone as far as you can. You have gone and you're about to pass where you would have started, and what is there? It's you again. Even in what they hope is a more complex universe of at least 4 dimensions, they keep trying to perceive a universe, as they describe it, as being finite and yet with no boundaries, and they simply look upon it, the best description they can come up with, the few that's had that kind of mental picture, which is, I guess, better than watching TV, is like instead of on the outside of the globe, the universe being as though we were on the inside of a globe. And you just can't see it, and so no matter where you go, the feeling is there are no boundaries such as on here. If you just take off walking, it's like that the earth itself, there's no end to it. And yet you think, well, if I'm going to come back where I was, it was infinite, but it's weird. And if you were inside walking around it, like the universe, if you could find the top of the fabric of the universe and you started walking, or you had a rocket and it stayed right against there, and you'd go and you'd come back where you started, is their theory right now. The point is, it would seem to be finite with no boundaries. This would appear to be finite, that people say, well, I can change. I can go past what I am. But right past that is you all over again. It just seems as though there are no boundaries. That's what the mind, it's the good old thing. It's part of the great beauty of the mind. It's part of the use that life makes of the human intellect, is you can ask the human intellect, is there any limits to what you are? And the intellect starts to answer, and you can be real good and say, wait a minute, let me move up. Are there limits to what, this body you live in? And the intellect says, yes. Sad to say. You say, are there limits to what that body can do? And the intellect says, my God, yes. My God, yes. You say, well, how about human feelings? Does it seem, yes. But, all right, how about your activities? Are there any limits? And the mind would say, all right, being the reasonable, objective observer I am, I will not engage myself, and I'll waste your time in sham humility, but let me think a second, and I must say, as far as I can see, and especially relative to the other aspects of me, this other stuff, the mind is limitless. The proof, part of the proof being, is I'm sitting right now thinking, is there anything I can't think of? And I go, no. I can think of things that don't exist. The good old classic flying pigs. I can think of that. I can think of an honest banker. I can think of an intelligent priest. I can think of all kinds of things that do not exist, so it shows the mind is free. All right. That is tied directly to the feeling that change is possible. Radical change, a sincere movement on my part. The difficulty with real change is that you are always, always so close to right where you were. Again, I refer you back. If we use this as a real solid example, that if change, you were going to let physical movement of your position on this planet signify, in fact you might believe, might even literally be change. The whole idea that people try to move out of town, go somewhere else if I could change my environment. But it still literally represents that change would be to go as far away from what I am, / where I am, as possible. But if you go as far away as you can, you're going to come back right there and one step further, and it's you all over again. So to say that any change is possible, I'll make the most radical change. You do understand, let me show you again, that right here, just as close as you can get, there is change. There is the alcoholic with his addiction to drinking becoming a non-alcoholic, and now being addicted to being a non-alcoholic. Because right past that point, you get as close as you can, if you could go that far. And of course on physically you can, but if you could go that far somewhere internally, right past the extreme point, as far away from where you thought you started, right past that point is what? It's what I told you night before last. It's you all over again. This is not only true with people, it's true in other areas, all areas, but I'm not here to talk about much more than humans. That right past everything in the 3D world, it's inescapable. It just cannot be seen by ordinary eyes. But in the 3D world, right past everything, go as far as you can in any possible direction, and right past everything, you understand, everything being as far away from you, that is your original position, as possible, which is what I drew by the red X, right past that, you've gone as far as you can away from you. Right past that is what? You're right back where you were. That right past everything is itself all over again. It is not simply some spiritual trick or psychological trick, and it's certainly not some spiritual curse. And it's not some weakness, some inherent psychological or emotional or intellectual weakness on man's part. It is the way that the 3D universe is structured. To believe that things can change, to believe that you can go somewhere, to believe that you can think different, to believe that the world itself can be other than it is. If that were true, and you could take it all and move it, the whole structure of one society, the whole structure of one race or one religion, the whole planet, the human race, if you moved it, if you could move it, and you got it, and it's going, and now we're getting somewhere, and now we're getting change, you're going to get to the point to get as far away from where you started, which if you got it going, you couldn't stop. No human could do that, not in the 3D world, not with a 2D mind. That, hey, we got it going, we'll carry this sucker as far as it'll go. You'd have no choice. So you'd get as far as it would go, right where I got the red X, and then you'd go right past that, and where would you be? Right past everything is itself all over again. I might point out that rather than this being some curse or some misstep on life's part, it is a supreme safety net. It is the ultimate fallback position. Life does not have to retreat. Life can let, in the 3D world, things continue to go forward even when apparently they're going forward in an unprofitable manner for some length of time. Because all it's got to do is go far enough, and what happens? Some of you have been alive enough to see we got one area of life's planet, sometimes, I don't want to point it out, I just use its initial, sometimes known as Germany. Not only them, but I keep picking on them. And it's not like I'm picking on strangers. But here in this century, twice the Germans have just gotten all out of sorts, raised all kinds of havoc, and just got trampled. And then what? It just took long enough for the rest of the world, mostly Europe, except for the French, who seem to be naturally nervous anyway because of that sissy food, I guess. But they began to just barely whistle and get out of their old uniforms, and what happened? The Germans were at it again. Did you forget why I brought up that little silly example? Semi-silly. Is that even life can let things that are evidently going to be, or maybe are proven to be, if you can see it back far enough, it was proven to be unprofitable. That is, it was going along a certain line and it came to an abrupt halt. Something happened. And war is a great example that one group gets slaughtered. One group gets defeated thoroughly. It's not just the group. It's not just some evil group of people or some dumb political group of people. It is life moving in certain ways in certain areas, and it's getting to be unprofitable, and something happens. Natural catastrophes, wars, all kinds of stuff. You make up your own examples. They're everywhere. Don't go overboard or you'll spend the rest of your life believing that every little thing that happened to everybody was in some way life saying, this is going too far, and if you're going to do that and you're not prepared for it, it's one step from there to divine retribution. And you're back right where you started. After all my work, you're right back thinking, hell, I'm a Jew after all, or hell, I'm a Christian, I am Baptist. I just go back to the Old Testament. That's all he's talking about because, hey, that's it. So watch it. just be careful. That's why I let Kyrute, he didn't specify, but once in the last month, so you remember, one of his says, children, don't try this at home. So be careful what you're doing. But life can let things even go in a certain way that are going to be proven unprofitable. May even appear at the time to be unprofitable to some groups of people. That is, parts of life that already sees, hey, I shouldn't be doing this. Life couldn't operate like that, right? Hey, I shouldn't be drinking. Could we have another round? But it can let it go far enough if it doesn't do something else. And if it goes far enough, that one thing will reach its extent and become itself all over again. That is, it does not go on infinitely. Even that which may appear, which may even prove to life to be unprofitable, it does not begin to go unprofitable, and then unprofitable Mach 2, then unprofitable Mach 3, and then just unprofitable, and it just spreads out to where, hey, unprofitability is the order of the day. We're all going to drown in unprofitability. All you got to do is let things go far enough, and that's it. Some of you may think, some of your nervous system may think I keep driving home the point about how hard it is to change that ordinary people doesn't change. There's also another way to look at it. Is that people can change, but that doesn't do any good because they can't stop changing, and so they go right past that. And so the so-called addictive behavior of the drunk goes far enough, and then the addictive behavior of being the non-drunk. And he's really the same person except he doesn't have a drink. And to make up for that, he's got your ear. The addictive behavior now, well, you can see the rest, but even if change seems to be possible, it never just goes a little way. But once it gets going, it's like setting this individual ship partially free from the gravitational pull of what they were, and they take off and they fly around their universe. They circumnavigate their globe, and they come right to the point that, good God Almighty, if they were James Brown, I guess, they would say, I have changed, and they can't stop. That sucker will fly 1 more millimeter, and it'll come right back here, and change is turned into what? Further proof of what I told you, that right past everything is itself again. So people apparently change, which is not the correct term, but people who apparently change. In the city, people who think that they observe change taking place in people, in groups, in cultures, it never stops. It will go to the point that it becomes itself all over again, which is another reason that you can't really see real change. Because it takes off, and you can think, well, things are changing, and then you forget about it, or something happens, you think. But what really happened was, it just went back to where it was. It went right past itself, and there it was again. And so even while it appeared to be, this is promising change. Things are looking up in this one area of the city, this one area of city affairs. But it won't stop there to where somebody might be able to say, all right, well, that sucker. Freeze frame that because we finally got change, he was wrong. And it won't happen. Because even if it appears to be change, it'll keep going until it does that. Now, something else happens on a more complex level, and something like that happens over the full fabric of time, real time. Because things, of course, do change, the growth is not possible. But as it's seen at the ordinary level, nothing's happening. Except people walking around the globe, people flying around the inside of a universe that seems to be limitless, there seems to be no boundaries, although they even admit that it's finite, that I am just me and I live inside of me, but I can change. You can go around, but right past everything is itself all over again. All right, now for something completely different. In ordinary affairs, people, organizations, institutions, no one knows all of the laws, bylaws, rules, directives, or principles relevant to the organization. I guess you were considered a comma. For instance, comes to mind, and I don't use this just because it's an easy target and used by comedians, but let's use the U.S. Postal Service. Don't laugh yet. Here is a huge organization, which is simply a magnification of a human, then a bunch of humans, and it's, of course, a smaller reflection of parts of life's own inner workings. But here it is, something that affects everybody almost every day. You can't escape its effect. But you surely know, and this is not an attack on the people, since it's such an easy target used, as I said already, in nightclubs, but you can go into any post office and ask a question to somebody at one counter. You can ask something like, can I use Canadian stamps to mail a letter from here into Canada? And somebody here may give you an answer. And you can walk right to the next person and ask them, chances are you get a different answer. And believe it or not, you'd think it's yes or no. But if you go to another counter, you can probably get a third answer. Or then you can get somebody, it's very likely you ask another one or two people, and probably somebody's going to say, well, do you know, I don't know. I'll go ask the postmaster, he's here. I'll go ask my supervisor. And they'll go ask the supervisor and come back with another answer. You can say, well, wait, I don't think that's right. Would you go ask the postmaster? And they'll go and ask him, and they'll come back with another answer. And then you can say, if somebody play along, you could even say, all right, I've had 5 answers here, and if you were just doing it and you seem non-aggressive, and you took the postmaster and you say, I'm curious now. It's no big deal. We're talking about whatever it is, 25 cents. But I've had 5 different answers. Would you actually go look it up and tell me? And there's a good chance that he does not know where to go look it up. Now, he's the postmaster of that place. Or he may go look it up if he knows the book. He may find it and read it and not be able to interpret what it says, since bureaucrats wrote it. All right, all of that. Now, don't just, when I was warning you not just to laugh, it was not to pick on the Postal Service or any other organization. But now here is the question that no one ever asked, and we got to go past the question, of course. All of these organizations that have any life, all institutions, all affairs of man, by affairs I'm including all sorts of things, the world of academia in general, as opposed to just a specific manifestation of it at some particular college. But the affairs of man, and it's just easier for me to break it down to a lower example, organizations, institutions, businesses, they all, if they've got a life at all, they experience what? Some success. Now, here's the question that no one ever ponders. If there's not one single individual, not one participant in there, from top to bottom, the head person, not one person knows everything there is to know about that organization, how is it possible for them to experience even some success? Of course, it does. I should drop my some success right here to start it. By city definitions, by city view, they succeed. Not that they don't have little setbacks and little quirks and peccadillos happen and little anomalies pop up, but in general, the organization and institution is successful, or it would not still be in existence. The business, the institution, the organization. So how is it possible for anything to be successful when there is not one, think about it a second, there is not one participant in there that knows everything that should be known to make it operate? How does it operate? Much less, how can it be successful? How can it apparently promote, enjoy some success, apparently provide some of the services when there is not one person, think about it, the head man, not just the postmaster of that post office, go find the postmaster general, or what do they call him now, the head of the USPS, the head man, and you ask him, can you send a letter from the United States to Canada with Canadian postage on it? You think he knows? Ask him all kinds of questions. I am sorely tempted to leave that part as a question for a change, because there's much more to it than that. And of course there's much more to it than the post office or some business or some institution other than our mail carriers. But you go to a church, find the head man, go catch the Pope, and ask him specific questions. I don't mean just about the mundane affairs of some local parish and what kind of bookkeeping, but start asking him questions about the basic structure that's right at the foundations of the raison d'etre of the thing existing. And you're going to get more smoke blown in your ears than the Postmaster General would give you when he's faced with the fact that he doesn't know whether you can actually put Canadian postage. You start asking somebody in something like religion or psychology, but religion, a prime example. Questions right at the heart of it, like, all right, I'm not going to get a big thing, but if you ask him some, I guess they'd call it theological question. All right, if there is one God, yes, and of course he's in favor of your religion, indubitably. How in the hell does that mean that there are like 50 million Arabs, Muslims, that believe that Allah, this other God, that said he was the only God, talked to Muhammad, does that mean they're all crazy? How do you know that we're going to the Catholic heaven when we die? How do you know that? Well, how do you know to what degree you can kind of fuck around and bend the rules and actually still make it in? I just use that again. I was trying to give you some room through a spectrum through something that would seem to be absolutely bylawed, firmly directed, such as the post office, that you got to have, it costs X amount to mail a letter. They don't dicker with you. If they say it's 25 cents to mail a letter, you can't say, well, look, if I put on 24, will it go? You know, they got rules, and they got rules and they're written down. But nobody knows all the rules. A manager of a Kmart store does not know all of the rules. Now, I'm sure they got a book. It won't be as big as a post office, I don't imagine, but a book about supposedly how to do every little thing. When to take returns, when not to take returns, what to demand of the returns. If the return is over X amount of dollars, you've got to have the receipt and the original sales sticker for the thing. All sorts of things, and the guy said, I don't know them all. All right, all the way from that to areas that would seem to be a little less specific, such as religion. But in no case will you ever find one individual who knows everything that surely, I shouldn't say apparently, that somewhere in that organization this information got to be known or the thing will collapse. If nobody in the organization, the post office, knows whether you can use Canadian stamps to send American postage, if nobody knows that, and let's assume that Canadian stamps are written out in Canadian coinage, maybe they'd pass, God knows what, don't make me have to make up every little fucking detail. If nobody knew, if nobody knows, and therefore nobody can stop it, let's assume that something could happen, such as starting to use foreign postage, and that the word got around. Too many people, like I'm making up, went in, and not just Canada, let's say, that they said, can you use foreign postage mail letters? And they say, well, certainly not, you got to use American. You say, wait, but if I'm mailing a letter from here to Czechoslovakia, and I already had some unused Czech stamps, and I put them on there, well, they go. And nobody knows. Let's assume that just begins to spread, and for some reason, the word gets around, follow me right quick, and so everybody that goes overseas, stamps are a lot cheaper because of the balance of, so everybody loads up with stamps, then it goes to a country to visit their homeland, they go back and visit their relatives in Greece, and they load up with Greek stamps, and then they send all their letters here. Pretty soon it's a negative drain on the U.S. Postal Service, and the thing collapses. The point being that you've got to see that somewhere the information to keep the institution, the organization healthy and functioning, somebody's got to know what the rules are to keep it going. And just the rules written in the book are not just to harass the customers, you understand. Those rules came about organically from life, telling some group of people, talking through them, that this is the kind of thing you've got to do to keep this going. And I need it going. Life needs a post office. I don't want to go into why, but it needs a post office. Well, you can see why it needs one. And so it has to have rules. It has to have directives. It has to tell the people how to function, to make this function, to help me function. But now back to the question. How can that be when and there's no exception to this, there is no affair of man, no organization, no institution, in which any one individual knows everything that's got to be known for that son of a bitch to function. And yet they function. Turn the tape over. Back in a second. Let me turn the tape over. Well, could I have a hat? I'll stall if you'll hurry. Give me like a 3-minute tail end so I can do a holiday message. Well, how long does it take to go? Ho, ho, ho. Well, how long does it take to go? Ho, 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 your mama. Well, I guess even Santa Claus has an evil twin brother. If he shows up on a soap opera, he will. We back rolling? We going? All right. See if you can, this brings up a possible little connecting path to something else I've talked about. I have pointed out, and some of you have gotten your own glimpse of it, if not a more stable view, that organizations, institutions, activities, that is, the affairs of man, push it between that which would seem to be the delivery of goods and delivery of services. All the affairs. That things do not do what they're purported to do. That is, psychiatry does not cure so-called mental illness. Church does not eradicate sin. The police activities of the state does not do away with crime. They simply do not. They cannot, or they'd be self-defeating. If they do succeed, they defeat themselves. It means that life is ready to extinct that activity, whatever it was. But now, since I brought up this in a particular way, let me see if I can enrich the possibilities of you looking at it. And that is that nothing, no thing, can do what people, now watch it, what other people say it should do. And that's not the same thing. Now, of course, it's the same thing, but I am expanding it. Nothing, that includes nobody, no thing and nobody can do. Now, not just its stated purpose. Not just the post office saying our purpose is such and such. Not just some new cabinet post in the government saying, well, the purpose of this new department is such and such. It's not just the church saying our purpose is to establish blah, blah, blah. Not just that now. But I'm saying that nothing can do, no person and no thing can do what somebody else says it should do. It's another mathematical fact. Now, this doesn't matter that the other person might say, all right, what I want you to do is what the purpose of the organization you're in says. That doesn't change it. What anybody else says is the purpose of anything or any person, that person or that thing cannot do exactly what that person said. It's supposed to be the purpose. All right? I'm going to tell you why, since you asked. It's due to the unrecognized difference between verbal reality and that other one. Whatever the verbal reality is, that one person says, all right, what you should be doing, my friend, my brother, my son, my wife, my husband, what you should be doing is, now there's the verbal reality. It's such and such, and they tell you. There's the verbal reality. But there's always that other reality. And they can't be the same or they wouldn't be different. They cannot by the 3D sight, by the 3D perception of ordinary people involved, they cannot merge. They cannot satisfactorily coincide. Because there are these two. There's verbal reality, like we all know and love, and then there's that other one. It is impossible unless something is going to happen of a very short-lived phenomenon, and which may be, and I don't mean this in some dangerous and world-shaking manner, but if they do apparently merge, then whatever it was that was going on disappears. It is like the matter and antimatter colliding, and you've forgotten it. It was just like a momentary problem. But other than just being a fleck in your eye, and you go, and you forget it, and you can't remember how many times you've done that in your life. If it's just a thing just for a second, you just go, oop, and it's out, and you're talking, you're doing something important, trying to talk sexy to somebody, and having a drink, or driving your car. I mean, that's just one of those things. There's just a small edge. You do it, and it's gone. That would be the extent of verbal reality actually merging with that other one. So other than that, over the long range, since there are these two, and since it is necessary, as witnessed by your own witnessing, right? You've been looking around, hadn't you? I told you to look around. Look the fuck around, and you'll see that there are two realities going on all the time. The verbal one and then that other thing, the other one. They're going on all the time. You can't get away from it. That is life. That is the reality of the city. If they began to be the same, then they wouldn't be different. And God knows what that might lead to. It could lead to the end of all your problems. It could lead to the end of everybody's problem. It is simply a fact. The two cannot coincide. No organization. Now this is back to, I'm talking about the personal level, and it doesn't matter what your particular view, attitude, opinion, idea is, it does not matter. When you go into the post office, if I leaped out behind a fern with a clipboard and said, would you answer a question for me right quick? What do you think is the purpose? What should the post office do? What's their purpose? Whatever you said, the post office is never going to do that. Now you got to watch it. Now you can say, well, it's to give me good service. And then you can say, well, sometimes, I don't know, I'd call their service real good, but it's not. You know, sometimes their service approaches being extremely bad. That's still, you hadn't hit it. Your verbal reality to say the purpose of the post office is such and such. The post office, in any meaningful way, over any length of time, can never, I didn't say would not, can never, as far as you're concerned, do that. If they did, the realities of verbal and the other one would merge, and you got trouble. It simply cannot be. An individual level, no matter what you say, you expect, or what somebody else should do. Apparently, you may say, you might have some support from somebody else, that you may say, I have no particular axe to grind. This is not necessarily to my benefit, but I'm telling you, here is what you should do. Here's what another person should do. Here's the way somebody should act around me. Here's the way somebody should act for their own best interest. Whatever it is you say that somebody else should do, somebody else is the same thing as the post office. They can't do it. Now you've got to forget some idea of there being an objective somebody out there. And for us to say, well, there's some reason they can't do it, you missed it again. It's that there is a verbal reality and there's another reality. The verbal reality is whatever you say they should do. Whatever it is you say they should do, they can't do it. Or then you would not have the two realities. You would not have the support of the city. Things would not stay as we experience them now. All right, I'll take it one little step further, see what happens. You cannot have the two complex meet the two simplistic. T-double-O, of course. That is a second order of me pointing out that the verbal reality cannot merge with the other one. They are different, and if they become the same, then they're not different anymore. If they are separate and they merge, then they're not separate anymore. Well, as that great Gothic Southern philosopher Jerry Lee Lewis would say, think about it. That no matter if you're operating at the ordinary level of your nervous system, if you're operating at the level of good old-town intelligence, whatever you say that something else should be doing, life, your wife, your husband, our country, your religion, the economy, the post office, Kmart, whatever you say they should do, they can't do. They can't do. If you begin to see that, you will no longer have any great faith. And I'm not going to say, well, stop it all, but you know I have much faith in you being out of sorts. You just never noticed it. Every fucking body's out of sorts all the time. It's just that they don't really, it's like peaks and valleys to where everybody on this planet or at least in close physical proximity, is everybody's peak or valley doesn't hit at one time to where suddenly you and everybody in the post office, all the other customers, waiting in line, and then everybody at the counter, and the people behind that you don't even see, that suddenly all of you are out of sorts at once. When that happens, it's bad news. As witness, again, I'll bring up, every now and then it's like that group I didn't want to mention that starts with Germany, that it's like all of them get out of sorts at once, and you see what happens. If you begin to see that literally what I have pointed out is true, that nothing, the reality of something, cannot do what your verbal reality says it should do. It cannot. If it does, it's meaningless, which is nothing wrong with that, because you've got to have some valleys. It's like a breathing room that they're apparently, at the ordinary level in the city, apparently, who knows what. I've never tried to gauge it. If I have, I'm not going to admit it. But it's like every other second is, tolerable. And then the other second, you're back online. It's like every other second you can hunker down the foxhole, and then something every other second makes you look back up and you're shot at again. And you got stress, and you got tension. And you think, God damn those people, why don't they quit shooting? What's wrong with them? Why don't they do like they should? They can't do like they should. How come I can't go in the post office and ask a simple question and get a direct answer? It's because you say that you should be able to get one. Therefore you can't. How come I can't go into a place of business, not just the post office, and meet somebody that's at least walking around decently, minimally competent at what they do? Why can't they? Because you say they should be that way. That's why. If you begin to see that, as I say, some of you are going to be sans a serious hobby in your life. You're going to have a big hole in it. It's not their fault. And of course, it's not your fault, because it takes two to dance and it keeps this balance going. But anything that your ordinary nervous system, the bundle that talks, that part of your nervous system, anything that it says other people should do, they cannot do it. Whether it be one person or thousands of people, a whole organization. And even if they can do it as soon as you walk out, that doesn't mean anything. You can't run back and say, wait a minute. Something told me that you actually did this with somebody else. They don't even know what you're talking about. They say, didn't you just answer a question? The person, you stop somebody walking in the counter, you say, did you ask them a question there? And they say, yeah. Did you get a good answer? Yeah, I was satisfied. And then you run back to the counter, wait a minute. How come you people at the post office will never give me an answer? They can't. See, the person that left, and if you just got a good, if you can listen real quick, the person that left and you said, did they give you a good answer? And he went, yeah. They didn't give him a good answer. See, he's responding to your question. Well, I think a lot of you saw it. What I was pointing out is literally, unless you're the type, which I know some of you have got a nervous system this way, unless you're the type that can still entertain and enjoy your nervous system shaking its little fist at the fact that 2 and 2 is 4. I know that some of you still got that. There's nothing wrong with that. You couldn't help it. But that you're still pissed that 2 and 2 is 4. Other than that, once you begin to see it, it is the same futility. Not theoretically, it is the same literal futility as arguing with 2 and 2 being 4 in the city than it is to realize that whatever it is that you say, that some affair in life, some person, some organization, whatever it is you say they should do, they cannot do it. Because you would have the two necessary realities, a verbal and the other one, you would have them merging. That is, all right, here's what you should do, here's what I expect, and it happens. It's obliteration. When it does happen in life, and as I pointed out, it does happen. Little old meaningless things going on all the time. When it does happen, you don't even notice it. It's just nothing. It was just that things, if I stopped you and you had to think about it, you'd say, well, the reason I didn't take the notice of it is that things did go according to plan. Things did do as they should. That's what I'm talking about. If they do make that kind of just temporary and meaningless merging, it's just gone. It's just, what is it that holds your attention? What is it your nervous system seems to respond to and not apparent out there? It's not that, hey, things went all right. People they don't write poems to that. They don't put that on their tombstone. They don't make maxims. They don't make up proverbs for that. They don't debate what's going on right in the halls of Congress, in the great Soviet Socialist Supreme meetings. Nobody. A man and his wife doesn't sit around. Parents and children don't sit around and say, well, let's have a great, lengthy discussion about everything that's going right. That is, of all of our the places where our verbal realities meets the other realities of each other. Nobody even thinks about it. When it does happen, it's like it was a shadow that fleeted by. The affairs of man are based on what? The sciences, the soft sciences, the religions, the philosophy are based on what? Things are not as they should be. Who else would write a poem except some guy went, hey, things are not as they should be. Women are not. Religion's not. My recognition quotient is not what it should be. That's the only reason anybody in the city is moved to write a poem. Well, either that and I'm feeling melancholy, so what else do? You write a poem. It's that things are not as they should be. That's the only thing that people notice. They're supposed to. There's nothing wrong. But once you begin to see that, if you can see that as being an inescapable mathematical reality, it's natural law. I keep saying mathematics just to try and throw a little coldness on your brains, your mind's attempt to want to make more out of some of this than there is and look at the metaphor behind it. Fuck a metaphor behind it. That's it. People cannot do, things, organizations, ideas cannot do what the verbal reality of you says they should. As soon as you say they should, they can't. And if they do, it's meaningless. If they do, it's the end of you and your participation in that your reality. It goes away. You forget about it. You don't remember what happened. It was just nothing. That is, things went right. And who remembers that? Nobody. If things go right all the time, you're talking about death. As long as things are growing, you've got irritation. You've got movement. You have got resistance. But to begin to see that personally, that it is a fact. You can't wait for things to change. There's nothing to do with your own trying to self-improve your own nervous system as it is, your own intelligence. It is a fact that cannot be recognized ordinarily, that whatever the verbal reality of any one person says that some other person, something outside themselves, should do, that other thing cannot do, by the very fact that the verbal reality of you says that it should be that way. And of course, conversely, if you say it should not be that way, then it'll be that way. There is no other choice except death. No, obliteration. That is, it becomes meaningless. And then what I'm telling you about that one area is meaningless. It's me trying to cure an ill that you don't have. It'd be you trying to cure an ill that you don't have. But notice, you do not run out of ills in the city. Thank God, thank God. So the verbal reality and the other one cannot merge. And for those of you who heard it, or you can at least remember it, I assure you there's much of this so good and so basic. I still am indisposed to go too much into it, but you cannot have the too complex meeting with the too simplistic, which is an expansion of what I'm talking about now. 6 minutes. Bless our hearts. All right. Something else I did touch on last week I wanted to bring back up right quick. All isms. And of course, as always, there's more to what I'm going to say, but I want to make it very specific. All isms of any kind that's ever been thought of, that any of you'll find in the dictionary. Nationalism, racism, denominationalism, that about covers it, doesn't it? Well, religion to personal, from politics to personal to religion. All isms give the ordinary intelligence the impression of living in a larger house. It gives ordinary intelligence the impression that their indoors is bigger than it is because they have got comrades. This is necessary in the city, and it is not some object, even though some parts of the last body, the critics again, have used in this sense also. A kind of, not just an attack necessarily, but even an attempted scientific or socially scientific observation of men running. Humanity is running by the herd instinct and how dangerous mobs are. Of course, that is simply one verbal reality attacking the other reality of somebody else. Only the French didn't like the way the Germans acted prior to World War I. Of course, I'm saying only the French. It does not matter what the verbal reality from one view seems to be. To do this, you cannot fool around with isms. Now, it's necessary in the city that people band together. If it's not, although I'm sure all of you are well read enough to know that throughout history, and it's still going today, that there are small pockets of last body, and it sounds intellectually correct, but there are small pockets of last body nowadays referred to pejoratively by the majority of the rest of the people as one-worlders, that are saying that the dangers and all the wars have been fought because of nationalistic feelings, or a lot of the problems between people on this planet is racism. And we got to stop all that. All right, if we got to stop all that, how's it been going on? That's the verbal reality of it. The reality of it, that other reality, has been going on coevally, simultaneously, with the verbal reality of some group saying, "All right, this is the problem, it's got to be stopped." Please note, in the city, they keep saying it's got to be stopped, but it is not stopped. I'm simply pointing out to you that the feelings that affect the nervous system of an individual being a part or having a larger indoors, and it comes about through these feelings of nationalism, all sorts of regionalism physically, and then what appears to be internally, of kind of racism, denominationalism about one splinter group in a religion to another. It is necessary in the city. Don't just say that causes, or don't fall into the same trap as everybody else is saying, well, that's what causes problems. You've got to, you people, even those of you in wheelbarrows with a small engine on it. Surely you do realize if suddenly you had the power of somebody to, all right, let's pick out one of them. How about nationalism? And just do away with it. You do know, not to make you melancholy to where you go home and write a poem, but if you could inadvertently, unexpectedly break into the pattern of life and do away with it, you do understand that tomorrow something would take its place. You better understand that. The thing is, I was going to point out, you cannot, it's another reason, a real revolutionist cannot be a follower, not a joiner, and any feeling, and everybody's got them. If you're alive, your nervous system has got them because there is a purpose. But all of these isms, you cannot pursue it anywhere. You cannot entertain it. It's not right or wrong. It's just simply necessary in the city, but it is not necessary out in the bushes. It is deadly, which is a waste of time, which is the deadly deadly. Well, all right, into public tape. I was going to give my pre-holiday gift to try and point you to a place, or maybe just me saying it will help push some of you beyond good old neuralizing. Ponder this kind of, not verbal reality, verbal map, verbal pointing. I referenced new or an alternative intelligence, new definition. But don't take definition as a thing. A definition is a pointing. It's a process. New intelligence would be thinking without believing. Thank you and ho, ho, ho.